What's up, everyone? I'm in the house with my beautiful friend Kat Schwarz, and we are going to be here in the Meticulous Moments space for the Meticulous Moments podcast, where we facilitate community upliftment through leadership development. And of course, it is season 2. Last year, season 1 stretched from June to December 2022, and we conducted 100 interviews, and it was just phenomenal. And this year, we are going to kick it into high gear with high level, high caliber speakers such as Kat. Here with me this evening, a little bit about Kat. She's the founder and CEO of Compassionate Healing Services. She's a suicide prevention and complex trauma specialist, an accessible yoga and meditation teacher, a master Reiki healer and spirit medium, a fat activist, and a speaker. Good evening, Kat. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Juanita. It's a dream to be here.
It is amazing. It's amazing. You and I have connected so frequently that, you and I have just clicked from the beginning. And it's so wonderful to have you on the show and to bring the audience to you, you to the audience, so that you can share everything that you're, busy with. Now, I know you. We've conversed. We actually met in a very unique way in New Jersey in a lobby of a hotel
Divine
after an event. Yeah. So would you like to explain to everybody who you are?
Yes, well, my name is Kat Schwarz. As Juanita said, I am the CEO and founder of Compassionate Healing Services, which is as much a business as it is a mission. And if I had to choose one overarching mission, it would be suicide prevention. And the way I do that, I say mental health done differently. I'm highly unique in the services that I provide and the way I view mental health treatment. And I'm so excited to delve into a piece of that today, but just a small piece.
Just a small piece, because there's so much to say. Yeah, there's so much to say. Now, Kat, you and I met in that lobby, and since then, we've been conversing and we've really delved into each other's topics. And I was talking to you about being a light worker, and an intuitive, and we discussed the fact that when I was young in the ministry, I was already an intuitive. I was already an empath, and I wasn't really sure what that meant because I was in the spiritual space. So I want to ask you, where did your and we're going to branch out about that a little bit later. But where did your journey as a light worker start? What was that? That pull towards that.
Well, I think to some degree for all of us, I've always had the heart for service, right? And just a pureness about me that, really does hurt me to hurt other people. I've always been very sensitive. And I was, though, brought up in Catholicism, right, in a very traditional religious background, in which a lot of the things that I now know to be true about myself and about many other healers on the planet, as well as the healing techniques that we use, are demonized, truly. And I did have a very psychic experience when I was about 6 years old, where I predicted the severe injury of my brother just a few hours before it happened. And but that was never, there was no curiosity around that for my family, right? So it was something that truly I was gaslighted out of. And the consequences of that, though, were severe, because when I decided to turn away from Catholicism, that it was no longer felt in alignment with my values, I became an atheist. And over those 18 years, my mental health progressively declined to the point of real suicidality. And that occurred when I was, I believe, 38 years old in 2017. And the thing we'll talk about today was my first step towards finding a lot more mental balance and wellness. And that was when I started eating intuitively. That was 2015. But again, I was doing that as an atheist. I was doing that at the urging of a therapist who I was seeing at the time for very severe postpartum depression and anxiety. I was even starting to exhibit bipolar symptoms. And yet my number one thing that I wanted to do was lose weight. Right. It seemed so important to me. So, so eating intuitively was a huge part of me finding balance. And that's why I wanted to start our conversation there today. But then that led me to do yoga. And then because of the yoga studio I was associated with, they hosted a spirit medium in 2018. And I went there not to get a reading. I didn't believe in that, but really to figure out what tricks this person must be using to convince a crowd that he could channel the people who aren't living. And yet and everything changed that day. I was reconnected with my father, who'd been in on the other side for 18 years at that point, and I was awakened to my own gifts as a spiritual healer. So that's the broad view of how that happened. But we'll get a lot more into specific details a little bit later about intuitive eating specifically.
Amazing, amazing. And people often use the word intuition, but it's only until you've really gone through an event that really brings you into that space where you have to face your intuition that you understand it. I did a post on Sunday. I actually went to my rock where I meditate every single week. And I said, when I was doing the video there, the live there, I said, the most important relationship you can have is with yourself. You have to have that specific great relationship with yourself before you can have it with others. And I feel like, when you were small and they denied you because you were building relationship with yourself, you were learning who you are, what your strengths are, what it is that you flow in. And that was just cut short. So I think sometimes we keep ourselves away from a great relationship with others because we don't have a great relationship with ourselves. And sometimes other people intervene. Even in our younger years, I spoke with someone earlier today, actually, that said a lot of the soul and the spirit wounds that we have happen in childhood. It happens when we are young because people often don't understand us if we don't fit in that mold. And I've spent my life trying to break out of that mold,
Right.
to do things differently. So thank you for that beautiful answer. Now, we both work in the spiritual realm. I was a pastor for 15 years. You are busy with Reiki. You are busy with all the projects. You're a light worker. You're an intuitive. How has that shaped your leadership? How has that brought you to a place where you feel strong in your leadership skills? Because it's evidently clear that you're a strong person. And, when you do something, you do it with vigor. And you always do it because you want to uplift and help others. How has being a spiritualist help you with your leadership skills, with honing those?
Well, I think it starts by expanding on what you said as far as, you can only meet anybody as deeply as you've met yourself, right? And
Yeah.
so that speaks to that really becoming spiritual. And I love the adage, and it's certainly not mine, that religion is for people who are afraid of going to hell, and spirituality is for people who've already been there. And
Absolutely.
when we talk about becoming spiritually mature or developed or even a spiritual leader, typically, and certainly in my case, that comes from very, very difficult circumstances most people wouldn't believe I've been through, or would have taken on in the first place, right? It's been extremely challenging getting to where I am now, but
Yeah.
the reality is you can't lead from behind, right? And if you want to be a leader, and you have to bring something to the table that's new and unique and inspiring, right? And so what I know now, the difference between intuition and its counterpart in my mind, which is ego, or the ego
Yeah.
mind specifically, is the difference between fear and faith, right?
Yeah.
And our ego is always going to tell us, because our ego is formed in childhood. We aren't born with these beliefs, right, around differences in skin color, right? Race, gender, all of that is a human construct, right? So we're born so pure without these beliefs, and it's our conditioning, for better or for worse, from our society, from our families, that teach us how to view the world, right? And those ego stories become so ingrained, and because our thoughts are shaped or creating our reality, we're constantly being reinforced that the world is unsafe or people are untrustworthy, because those are the people we're attracting, right? So it really is about breaking out of, some people call it the matrix, right? Or that ego fear-based conditioning that tells you that you must be controlled, right? You must follow the rules of other people. You can't trust yourself. You have to trust the government, or you have to trust the medical system, or even your family if your family has shown they're untrustworthy, right? And it's about being brave enough to follow that inner knowing, that inner faith, that even if you can only intuit or feel or know the next step and you have no
Yes.
idea where it's leading, you have to, jump off that cliff and know you're landing in a feather bed, right? And taken a lot of strength, and a lot of years for me to get to this place. But here I stand.
Here you are, and you're strong, and you are, moving in faith. And that's what struck me when we had our first conversation in that lobby. I was sitting and I was doing a live with people there that I was highlighting after the book camp. And here comes this beautiful lady walking to me, and she says, "Hey," and we started the conversation. And I believe we also did a live together that day. Now that takes courage and that takes faith, because I mean, it's just something clicked in your spirit, and that was a divine appointed moment. And there we were together, and a friendship was formed. So I want to ask you, you discussed how we grow up inherently with the beliefs that our families hold, because we are born into that. That's what you mentioned. I want to ask you, what was the defining moment that I call them penny drop moments? For me, it was something like when I realized who I really was, when I realized what my real purpose here on earth was, but not from external influences, from within myself. It felt like the universe stopped in that moment. It
Mm-hmm.
felt like it was that clarity. What was that defining moment for you that you knew what your mission and your vision is, your purpose?
Well, there honestly have been many. I think I could probably go off on 5 different directions with that. But the one I want to focus on today is the book that I read in 2015 that really woke me up to the fact that
Yeah.
the firmly held beliefs that I had around exercise, diet, the BMI, um, the what health looked like, and felt like. And I had carried these beliefs as not just as a woman in a diet culture, which I live in America, that we, are a diet culture, right? We're swimming in it. A lot of other countries, I'm sure, have similar issues, but possibly not to the degree of the United States.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a family that was very, very committed to this idea that thin is healthy, and the way you stay healthy is to stay thin, and you do that essentially at any cost, weight loss at any cost. And the alternative, the consequence of that for my family has been poor health. A lot of my family guys in their 60s and 70s with diabetes and other type of illnesses, and yet we've always prescribed since, and it's important to say that I'm 44 years old. I was born in 1979.
Yeah.
And dieting has really only been around since about 1980. It's about the same age as I am. And I'll tell you right now, it's a 43-year failed experiment, right?
Yeah.
So, but I was doing this not just as a woman in a diet culture, and a woman whose mother had taught me dieting and was very much prescribing it to me as well. But then I became a physical therapist in a accredited graduate school, and I was also taught dieting, and I was teaching dieting to my clients. And this was something I really believed. And my mental health had really started to decline in 2010 after the birth of my first child, much worse after the birth of my second child, because that birth was a traumatic birth. And this was now 2015. And even though my life was falling apart in many ways, my marriage ultimately ended in 2020, but that was clearly on a path towards failure. And there were so many other things that I was dealing with. And yet, because I had had a baby in recent years, my weight was higher than I wanted it to be. And my number one complaint as I sat on my therapist's chair was, I have to lose weight. I have to lose weight. I'll never feel good again if I don't lose weight. And she gently recommended to me this book called Intuitive Eating. I finally decided to read it thinking this was going to be just another diet book, just, another a little bit different information, but essentially the same information. And instead it was a complete and total paradigm shift. It
Wow.
really taught me that biologically dieting does not work, because each and every time you deprive your body of calories, of energy, right?
Yeah.
And then nutrients like carbohydrates, which are incredibly important for your brain, right? For your body to function. And you go on these wild diets, your body perceives that as an emergency. And
Mm.
while, of course, your body will let go of fat temporarily, once that diet ceases or you go into maintenance mode or whatever you're calling,
Yes.
your body will coordinate a sophisticated multi-systemic effort to make sure you gain that weight back over
Mm.
time, because it does take the body time, sometimes 3 to 5 years, to really find that what it considers homeostasis, not just by bringing you back to the weight that you were when you started your diet, but in 2/3 of cases bringing your weight even higher, raising what we now know to be your biological set point. Because it makes sense, doesn't it, that just like your
Yes.
hair color or your hair texture or your eye color or your shoe size or your height are
Yes.
predetermined by your genetics, so is a weight range. It might not be a specific weight number, but it's a range of about 10 to 20 pounds in which your body feels its best. And your body doesn't care about what Instagram considers to be the
Yes.
ideal body, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Evolutionarily, we've lived through famines, right? Where
Mm. Mm.
um, and in what other point in time would it have been considered healthy to have visible abs? Right? This is something that's come about because of patriarchy, because of
Yeah.
white supremacist ideology, because of capitalism, right? Because it diet companies, beauty companies make a ton off of our insecurities,
Brilliant.
especially as women, right? So when I read that book and I understood the biology of how this can't work, and then I put pieces together from other books, and I want to especially mention Dr. Sabrina Strings, her book, Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Roots of Fat Phobia, in which she points to the inherently racist, sexist root of the BMI, which, at least in the United States, is the
Yeah.
gold standard for health. Meanwhile, it was never intended to measure health at all. And it was never intended to be used for individuals only populations. And
Yes.
you know, the way that came about to be the gold standard is, shady, to say the least. It very
Yeah.
much influenced by the lobbying dollars of these billion-dollar diet and supplement companies, and even pharmaceutical companies that are now selling weight loss drugs, or
Mm.
even marketing drugs that were produced for other purposes as, oh, well, there was incidental weight loss, so therefore this is a weight loss drug. It's really disgusting in the United States, how bombarded we are all the time with these ads
Mm.
um, around weight as it relates supposedly to health, when there's quite literally at this point a mountain of evidence to the contrary to show that thin and healthy are not, in fact, not synonyms.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And I've seen over the years, because I'm a mama bear, you're a
Yeah.
mama bear, we know other mama bears, and I've seen my friends, I've seen many of my friends kind of catapult into that, after they've given birth, their bodies change. That is a given. I mean, and then they really run after all these dietary supplements. I think we've all done that before, only to find out years later that some of those products have been taken off the market essentially because of the harm that they have caused to people's bodies. So, I mean, I think what you and I discuss as well is living in a healthy manner, making it a healthy lifestyle. And what worried me and what concerned me was the beautiful point that you brought across was, when you deny your body certain things, you are essentially denying your brain the food that it needs to function. All because you want to be a certain size, or you want to look like someone in a magazine, and that's good. Being healthy and exercising and eating well is good. Actually, putting your body and your brain through that strain is not good. It's not healthy in the long run. And as a mama bear, we have to be healthy for our children and for our families, and for the future. So thank you so much for that. And we talked about and you discussed this with me yesterday, and we talked about this topic, and I thought it was phenomenal how timeless this interview is, because we're moving into the month of February.
Yes.
You mentioned three things. You said it's going to be a month that we talk about the New Year's resolutions that people make. and I'm gonna put it. I'm gonna hand it over to you. It's gonna
Yeah.
be about the New Year's resolutions. An article that you read in the New York Times, I believe, or a New York magazine, and then of course it's also in February. It's Black History Month. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit more about that because I found that extremely interesting.
Yeah, so when you and I were talking about what topic we would want to broach, because there's so many, that we could talk about, this is the one that really came to me as being the most timely, and for some of the reasons that you said. So first and foremost, at least in the United States, there's this huge push right around New Year's for what are called New Year's resolutions, right? Where you make usually almost exclusively at least if you listen to most people around you, relating to weight and specifically body size, right? So
Yes.
there's that's when the gyms become filled with new members, and typically by February most people have at least started to wane on their New Year's resolution. So we find ourselves at the end of January, and in January here in the United States, it was the New York Times, a very prominent newspaper in New York, that featured finally an article on intuitive eating, and its co-authors Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch. And I say finally because this book was written in 1995.
That's a
This is
long
not
time ago.
right. This is not a new book. We're approaching 30 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, where these two registered dietitians who became registered dietitians in 1985, 10 years prior to that, decided, or their education told them that low calorie, highly restrictive dieting was the way to was what to prescribe to people in larger bodies who wanted to lose
Mhm.
weight, and that this was healthy. And after 10 years of doing it the way that they were taught to do it, and almost without exception, except for those participants that there is a certain type of person that just can keep up with these types of restrictive behaviors
Yes.
for life,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
when we talk about 97% of diets
Yeah.
fail, those
Yeah.
3% aren't, they're still biological humans, but they have if we want to call it willpower or discipline, to keep up those restrictive behaviors in disordered, and possibly eating disordered behaviors for their lifetime, right? Um, so, pardon me. I think I lost my place. I'm sorry, Juanita. I'm a little embarrassed.
Oh, you're talking about the New Year's
Oh,
resolutions,
right. So, yeah. So
Everyone starts off in Jan. Yeah.
thank you. So, yeah. So after so in 1995, these women finally said, what's wrong with this process, instead of what's wrong with these people, right? And they
Mm.
really started blaming the process, or started researching the process. And now there's well over 100. It might be over 200, but well over 100 articles at this point since 1995, or research studies I should say, that are supporting the claims of intuitive eating, that allowing your body to guide you, not taking any advice, if you will, from whether it comes from the mouth of your doctor or your trainer or a diet book. If it's not your inner voice telling you this is what to eat, when to eat, how much to eat, the types of foods your body is craving, and the intention is weight loss, it will ultimately fail for some of the reasons that we've covered, but not all.
Yeah.
And then third, the fact that Black History Month is February, that's significant, because one of the things I want to promote when we talk about this is a petition that I wrote back in 2020 that speaks way more to how this relates to, and it's because of the history of the BMI and where it came from, that the fact that we make medical decisions based upon this piece of paper that was that's being used for a purpose it was never intended for. It's essentially useless, for the purpose it's being used for, and we make medical decisions on that. There's been an enormous impact on healthcare, especially for women of color, Black women specifically. And if you go into the comments, I believe that Juanita has posted that petition there. I use the hashtag #EndMedicalFatPhobia. You'll read much more about about that piece if you read the petition. I will be on another podcast later on this month called The Chop Up Show in the United States, and we're going to go much more into the racial justice piece of this and expand on the petition, but please do check it out. But the bottom line is that this issue is having an enormous impact on physical and mental health care in the United States in a way that's really unconscionable for a body, which is the American Medical Association, and doctors who pledge to do no harm. It's doing a tremendous amount of harm.
Yeah. Very important that we bring this to the fore and that we discuss these concepts, because I know these people in the audience that do sit and listen and that realize and they watch and they see, they have been going through that cycle year after year. And, that's one thing that we have to really look after. It's our health. It's not something that we can purchase. It's something that we have to value. It's something that we have to, look after so that other people can do the same. And just thinking that people would really just hurt their bodies in a way just to look a certain way or just to feel good, that says something. And we're going to get to that, about the emotional intelligence that they have. Now I wanted to we talked about suicide and suicide prevention, and you and I have had encounters with that in our lives. I've known wonderful people who have committed suicide, and I always speak about suicide prevention over the years in the ministry as well. And I want to hear because that was something that you mentioned yesterday as well, and I said we have to put it in here. What is your take on suicide, the reasons why that occurs, and how can we prevent this phenomenon? How can we prevent this? Can I call it an epidemic? Because there's so many wonderful, beautiful people out there that we need and we love, and the world they make the world a better place. Yet they don't understand that about themselves, and they end their lives. What is your take on that?
Well, I mean, as it relates to this topic specifically, it is very related because anorexia specifically, suicide is the second leading cause of death. And that's a startling statistic. But, the reality is a lot of people would rather be dead than be fat. That's how stigmatized it is to be fat. In a diet culture. And so it's very much related to my overall mission, but my mission comes from my own personal experience with mortality. So as I said, I had become increasingly more severe with my mental health, starting with the birth of it was really something that stemmed from my own childhood trauma, although I didn't know to call what I had been through trauma, because I believed that only people who had been to war zones or were first responders at horrific scenes, right? Who had been raped or, things of that nature. That's what I thought trauma looked like, right? So, and it was really when I discovered that more foster children coming out of foster care have complex PTSD, which is what I was ultimately diagnosed with, then soldiers returning from war. That really got my attention. So it really was my traumatic, toxically stressful childhood that set me up for, I'd had anxiety since I was about 6 years old. I'd really almost never known a life without it. And therefore, I remember the first time, it's why I drank, really, because the first time alcohol went into my system was the first time I felt a relief of kind of that anxiety. And then when I found a much healthier way to deal with that in my 30s, which was yoga, I was really startled by the fact that breathing was making me feel better, right? Breathing with this conscious intention was making me feel better, frankly, than alcohol or even Xanax. And it was like this real revelation that this feeling in my body had a name and that it was abnormal and that not everybody felt that way and that I could do things that would mitigate it or even make it go away, So to some degree, I had normalized my own mental health symptoms for such a long time, they didn't seem abnormal to me. But when they became unsurvivable, and I mean that literally, because the more I admitted to the people around me, including my therapists and psychiatrists, that I was feeling worse and worse, the more medications I got prescribed, right? So I was on plenty of SSRIs, SNRIs, and then in 2017, after a prednisone prescription caused me to become manic, I was told that I had bipolar disorder and I needed to be on mood stabilizers.
Yeah.
And all of those pharmaceuticals had side effects that I considered personally to be intolerable for my system. And at the time, I had discovered illicitly that cannabis or marijuana was medicinal for me, right? And I had a psychiatrist finally validate that for me, along with the diagnosis of complex PTSD, because where I live in New Jersey, at the time, now it's legal recreationally even, but at the time it was only legal for medical patients. So she was able to facilitate getting me the medical license. And that got me off every other medication that I was on. And only then did I feel significant relief of my depression. And at that point, my psychiatrist kind of gave me the green light to go ahead and do it my way, right? And that required a ton of financial privilege and many other privileges. So it's something, you know, I want to see so much of what has helped me become far more accessible on this planet. But so when I talk about suicide prevention, it's very much a personal mission. And not only did I help to lift myself through my own suicidal crisis, then my partner, Alexandra Barclay, she had much more severe trauma as a child. She's a human trafficking survivor from Chile.
Oh.
And, with many more abuses after that throughout her life. And she lives with borderline personality disorder, one of the hallmarks of which is suicidal ideation. So it's very much a mission that's personal to my personal story, to my family, and my current reality, and specific to what we've been talking about with intuitive eating and eating disorders and the pressure to be thin at all costs. It's absolutely relevant because, as I said, the startling truth is the suicide is the second leading cause among people with anorexia.
Can you believe that we've come to a place where there are people that don't value themselves and their bodies and what they can bring to the world? And that's really because of all the external impulses. I believe we are bombarded by social media, but things that are set into place because they are marketing tools that sell. And these are the people that unfortunately they're not they're not better off after that. So thank you for that answer. I appreciate you. And there are people that are in the audience that need to hear this. We are not all to conform to one way of looking, to one way of being, to one way of seeing the world. Here we facilitate that community upliftment through leadership development. And the first person that we ever lead is here. And the first place of happiness is here. And that's why I mentioned that, I said on Sunday, the most important relationship you have, the strongest relationship you have to have, besides God or the divine, is you. If you have a good relationship with yourself, you'll have it with others. If you know your worth, you will, see the worth in others. So it's good that we facilitate these uplifting conversations so that people can hear, well, there are people that are different. It is okay to be me. It is okay to have flaws and not look perfect and not be perfect all the time, because there's no such thing as perfection. And we had this discussion. You mentioned this yesterday when we were talking, and we had such a lovely conversation. And you said there's a difference between being thin and being healthy. And immediately it struck a chord with me, because I remembered when I was young, I was super, super thin, and I did some modeling, but I wasn't necessarily healthy because I didn't eat the things I felt my body needed. I didn't look after myself the way I was supposed to. Instead, after becoming a mom, I went into the martial arts, and instead of being thin, I'm now muscular through the exercises in the martial arts and the fitness and the self-defense, but I'm healthier than I've ever been. So would you like to talk to us? You mentioned a lot about this yesterday, the difference between being thin, like they portray in the magazines, and being healthy.
Yeah, I can expand on that quite a bit actually. That's not my opinion, right? There is as I said, a mountain of evidence that shows. You can even look up if you Google the obesity paradox. It's called a paradox because simply it does not jive with our current understanding of what we believe health looks like. But the reality is there is a plethora of chronic diseases where it's shown that, using the BMI as the criteria, people in the range of overweight to mildly obese are actually living longer than their thinner counterparts. So it turns out that fat is health protective. And we know that from the fact that women, when we lose a lot of body fat, we don't even menstruate, right? We can't create life. We can't do what we came, in some ways to this planet to do without body fat, right? So body fat has been demonized in a way that does not in any way, it's not supported by the evidence, right? That's a big buzzword in medicine is evidence-based approaches. There's nothing evidence-based about the prescription of weight loss at this point. There's nothing evidence-based about the use of the BMI as a standard of health, right? And yet here we are, right? And our cardiologists are just as likely to be prescribing keto as your mother is, right? So it's really concerning. This is a huge blind spot for the medical community, and what I really hope to highlight, again, please check out that petition in the comments if you want to read more about that. And then I do also want to touch on the idea, so thin and healthy, I say they're not synonymous, which is not to say that someone who's thin can't be healthy, right?
Exactly.
But it's also to say that someone who's fat can be healthy too.
Exactly.
That health does not have a look. Health is a feeling. Health is a feeling of peace. Health is a feeling of comfortability in your skin. It's a feeling of being able to meet your needs, the needs that your body's asking for, including food, including body fat, right? And to feel at peace about that. So, and then the third thing I want to say about that is that health is not a prerequisite for basic human decency and respect, right? And people who are whether it be unhealthy or fat and unhealthy, do not owe you anything in regards to not being the recipients of constant bullying, supposedly for their well-being, for their health, right? And it's just such a thin excuse at this point to make another person feel less than, right? And
Yeah.
it's just something that we're ready to grow beyond as a human race, because it's ridiculous to me now, especially as a spiritual healer and understanding, at the level of consciousness I do, who we really are and the power we really hold. We are so much bigger than these physical bodies, right? It doesn't matter how big your body is. Think about, the scale of this earth compared to the largest known stars in the universe, right? We're a speck, a pencil eraser, and then we're ants walking on that pencil eraser.
Exactly.
Right. It's just such it's such an outdated and disproven and frankly cruel and harmful institution that to this day in 2023, way too many people, physicians, dietitians, are buying into at a tremendous cost, not just to fat people, because just like patriarchy hurts men as much as it hurts women, fat phobia hurts thin people just as much as it hurts fat people. Because the other part of that, when thin is assumed to be healthy, then you might walk into had this happen recently to my fiance, who's very petite. We walked into a cardiologist because she's been having chest pain and things that are concerning, and because she's thin, it was really just dismissed. Oh, we'll do testing, but I'm sure you're fine. And that testing is coming back, and eyebrows are starting to be raised, and that's not unusual for people who are thin to be dismissed with their health concerns because they're thin. And it's also not unusual for fat people to be dismissed for their health concerns because they're fat. And everything is blamed on weight. Even though thin people get diabetes, apparently, it's a concrete link in most people's minds between being fat and being diabetic. It just doesn't make logical sense.
It
And we
doesn't.
have to start looking at logic and reason and evidence over um, you know, institutions that are built on misrepresentation, even lies, false truth, all of it.
Mm, mm. And I agree with you 100%. And you mentioned something. There's two things I wanna touch on. Something that you mentioned yesterday, and the fact that all people deserve, to be treated in a dignified manner. And this is something I've taught for years and years. I treat the cleaner at the mall with as much respect as I would treat whoever I'm rubbing shoulders with at a big event that are CEOs or multimillionaires, because they are all important. They are all created by the divine. And that's something that's very, very important for us to do, and to bring back this community upliftment through this information that we bring, through this awareness that we bring. And then the second thing that you mentioned yesterday was that at some companies, and I believe you mentioned the statistics, there were people that were not afforded jobs because of their weight.
Mm.
I mean, that is something serious that is happening. That is not acceptable. Can you tell the audience about that?
Absolutely. It's the reason my petition exists. It's the reason that I call myself specifically a fat activist, even though, and this is something I didn't mention in the last segment that I'd like to bring up, even though I hold thin privilege, right? That's something most people don't even know, that thin privilege exists. What do I mean by that, right? So thin privilege doesn't mean that you personally identify as thin, right? It doesn't mean that you don't have, that you're within a specific BMI range, right? Having thin privilege is not being overtly discriminated against, or um, assumed, have things assumed about you simply because of the size of your body, right? Not unlike having things assumed about you simply because of the color of your skin, right? And thin privilege looks like being able to walk onto a plane and know that you're going to fit into that seat, or not need a seatbelt extender, right? Or to walk into a store and know you're going to find your size, right? And the reason most people mock thin privilege is because they think that being fat is a choice. And that's what we've been talking about this whole time. No, it is not, right? Genetically, well, for the most part, your genetics determine your body weight, right? And it's your efforts to rail against what's natural for you, because only about 2% of the population naturally have the body type that we all, or most of us, idealize at this time, in history. It's not the way, Michelangelo's women on the, Sistine Chapel had body fat, right? These perceptions change over time. So, but in our current social media obsessed reality, the body type that we idealize is very unattainable and mostly unsustainable, even for people who can get there, right? So, and then in addition to that, not only genetically are most of us, 98% of us, larger than what we want to be based on this stupid, meaningless ideal, then we prescribe dieting, and it's the act of dieting itself that causes the body to put weight on over time. So it's anonymous. I don't know who said this, but one of my favorite ways to describe what I'm talking about is dieting is a cure that does not work for a disease
Mm,
that does not exist.
mm,
Because
mm,
not
mm.
only is it not pathological to be fat, right? It's the resistance you're adding to your biology, that your biology is then fighting, that is making you bigger over time. So
Exactly.
it's just really mind-bending to me that we
Mm,
continue to do this, and wonder why, the war on obesity isn't working, because, as I said,
yeah.
it's a 43-year failed experiment, and it's time to own up to
Mm. Yeah, it's time that we bring these issues to the fore, because people are suffering and they are doing so in silence. So, for anyone in the audience, for instance, when Kat explained that to me yesterday, I realized I'm not thin, I'm muscular, but I enjoy thin privilege. There's a difference. And we have to learn these terms, because we need to teach the younger ones. We need to change society, and we need to bring that awareness. And that's why I love our conversations. In effect, we discussed emotional intelligence as well. I think it takes a certain amount of and a certain degree of emotional intelligence for people to realize this, to be first confronted with the information, to digest it and to realize maybe they've been in the wrong mindset about their weight, about their body type, because some people are born, people are born into that, you said, the DNA of their family.
Yeah.
So they have a certain frame. Some people are big boned, some people are thin boned, and that's not, there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes they look at their peers and they wish they'd looked another way, and that self-hatred starts to manifest, and there the problems start with depression and anxiety, and because what is wrong with me, why am I not like this? And that facilitation of the growth of emotional intelligence, I believe we can do more in that arena. So when we talk emotional intelligence, Kat, what comes to the fore in this theme for you? What resonates with you?
Well, I mean, I think it takes a very strong person to be able to really, as you said, confront these ideas in their own being, because the reality is we tend not to judge other people nearly as harshly as we judge ourselves, right? We can look at most of our friends and family and who are trying to lose weight or who are criticizing their own bodies and see the beauty, right? You don't see their flaws, and yet when it comes to ourselves, it's all we can tend to see, right? So it really is the work of this specific learning to eat intuitively and learning to develop self-trust, right? Around that your body has innate wisdom, and it's going to lead you to the healthiest version that you can be. And not everyone can. Not everyone health is not accessible to everyone. Another thing I talk a lot about, especially if you go to my social media, you'll find that healing is a privilege currently, because it requires so many privileges. And I did want to go back, because I don't think I completely answered your question before. When it comes to thin privilege, that's important to talk about, because yes, currently in the United States, fat phobia or discriminating based on somebody's weight is legal. It's something that can legally be done in the workplace, as well as it's even more horrifying, in my opinion, in the doctor's office, because most doctors now, based on the recommendations of their ruling bodies, are essentially saying, if you're not within this certain BMI range, you can't receive high quality medical care. You have to lose weight before you can then receive care. And that's a little bit like saying, go find me a unicorn and bring it back, and then I'll go ahead and treat you. And but meanwhile, bariatric surgery, which is a barbaric surgery, that has very, very strong correlations with poor health outcomes afterwards. Yes, you lose weight, but that doesn't mean you gain health, right? I had an aunt who passed away within a few years of her bariatric surgery, and she lost several hundred pounds, and also her ability to metabolize any vitamins or nutrients. And she was on IVs for the rest of her life. These are, and now this is being recommended in the United States to children as young as 13. I mean,
Oh no.
this is an emergency.
Oh,
This is
no.
an emergency, and we're going the completely wrong direction. We're seeing this a failed experiment. We're seeing the results of this, just like the war on drugs and the war on obesity is not working, and therefore we're doubling down on all the techniques that haven't worked over the past 44 years, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's time to really start looking at this from a higher level.
Yeah. And I love the message that's coming through. Kat is not saying uh, overeat and don't worry about it and don't look after yourself. You can be, she's saying when you are born with a certain frame and you maybe don't look like your peers or you don't fit into that certain size of clothing, be yourself, make the best of your health, exercise, eat intuitively as your body asks, and live happily. Because I was thinking, you mentioned menstruation earlier, and the women out there, they will know when you can be on a lovely healthy diet, but when it's that time of the month for a woman, your body craves different things.
Mm-hmm.
So if you deny your body that, in essence, you are doing more harm than good, because if your body is craving those things, it's because it needs it. And I think that's where we need to get that balance, Kat, because people must know the short version to say we want health and we want moderation in everything, but there's no need to hate yourself or to feel like you're a lesser person or that you can't live in dignity if you're a size 14 or a 16 or a 18 and that's your natural body type. A person that's in a shape, I'm an hourglass. Someone that's a pear or an apple, they were shaped by the divine according to their DNA to be a pear and an apple. Some people are a plank. There's nothing you can do about it. Your body shape will always be that. Look after your body, tune into yourself, and look after it and be healthy. That's so important.
Well, I certainly don't want to oversimplify the, intuitive eating. I would highly encourage anyone to check out the book or even resources about it online, my website included. It's a 10-step
Yes,
process. It's not just, go ahead and eat what you want, figure it out on your own. It's a 10-step process. It's a practice, really. It's not, um, there's, there's no rules, there's guidelines. It's a practice.
yes,
It's the way that yoga is a practice, because if you're a yogi, you know that you're never going to get it. You're never going to get that perfect pose, or you're always searching for more, right? And you're going to have this relationship with yourself, with your body, and with food for the rest of your life, right? So
absolutely.
certainly go and learn more about the process of intuitive eating. But it's important to note that for those of us, and there's many of us who've been in that restrictive mindset for decades, for
Yes,
decades, it can look like, when you start to really divest from these beliefs
yes,
that you've held for a very long time, but that were not based in truth, and you start understanding the truth. And even the first step of intuitive eating is to reject the diet mentality. That itself can take months just to master. What does diet mentality sound like? What action steps is it causing me to take? How can I disrupt that thought before the impulse to act on it, right? So that in and of itself can be a huge ask. But
yes,
oftentimes it does look like, quote, binging on your favorite foods for a few weeks at a time, just to prove to your body that you're no longer going to restrict it.
yes,
And then,
yes,
if you allow yourself, I promise, because I've done this, if you allow yourself your favorite food, whether that's ice cream or fried chicken, or, that you've been depriving yourself for years, again and again and again and again, eventually, I promise, your body will habituate to it. It's not something
yes,
that you're just going to want to do forever. It's really about proving to yourself and your body that you are giving it free, unconditional permission
yes.
to eat,
That
right?
love. Yeah,
And then the
yeah,
other part of that is really just accepting and appreciating your body where it is today, right? For
yes,
everything it's ever done for you. They'll take those. And I'm not saying it's easy. This is honestly probably the hardest work I've ever done, but it turned out to be the foundational work of my spiritual awakening. So it was absolutely
beautiful.
worth it. But these thoughts and that have been ingrained for 30, 40 years aren't going to disappear in a day or a month or even a year. But the work is well worth doing. And really, as we said, there's such a link between
Yeah,
this specific issue,
yeah,
around diet and body, and your body image, and mental health issues, and even suicidality specifically, that it is really worth exploring if
yeah,
you are one of those people who's, deep down. And I would say at some point, I even had this mentality, well, I would rather be dead than be above this certain weight, right? and
yeah.
and that's just such a harmful message,
Mm,
not just to yourself, but to the people around you who do live in fat bodies, and in many cases are living joyous,
yes.
healthy, um lives
Peace.
filled with peace and love, and romantic love and relationships. And I highly encourage anyone whose social feeds are filled with diet talk and inspiration around specific body ideals, get rid of all of that and really start filling your feeds with images of people who are happy, with people who are are living lives deeper than just what they're eating and how often they're exercising and, you know, what their bodies look like in specific, you know, fashionable clothing, right?
Yeah,
Life is
yeah.
so much bigger than that and deeper than that. And, you know, and when I was able to let go, because I've asked this question to so many women, so I know I'm not alone. Honestly, when I found intuitive eating and gave myself the permission to let this
Mm,
go forever, meaning I will never again weigh myself and decide that that's not good enough and I need to be lower and I'm going to intentionally try to lose weight. I haven't weighed myself in so long.
yeah,
It was like being let out of a prison. I would say about 70% of my thoughts at that time were consumed with
yeah,
what I had eaten last, what I was going to eat next, what my weigh-in was going to be, you know, how I was going to get to the gym, why weren't my gym workouts working anymore? I mean, it was all consuming.
mm,
And you
mm.
know, it allowed me to focus on all the other areas of my life that needed attention, which were numerous. But for me, that was huge, and I know for so many of your listeners, that will be huge as well.
Yeah. There's so many concepts. I think we'll have to do another session as well,
Yeah,
Kat, because there's so many concepts. As you are talking, I'm thinking about sleep hygiene, drinking water, I'm thinking breathing, you know, exercise, the
well, we're going
energy.
live this week, right?
Hey,
We're going live this week twice
I
on
think we should
Facebook. So
elaborate on all
yeah,
of
let's
that.
expand.
I really think we should elaborate on all of that. They're talking about the higher your vibration is, you know, what that encapsulates and how it furthers your health as well as your life. So
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about the intuitive side, seeing as that is something that we've touched on today. When I went into the ministry, I did not know that I was an empath. I didn't know that I discovered my intuition so strongly. I would walk into a church building and I would feel a flood of all of these emotions. I would feel, and I thought, what's up with me? Because how can I feel, you know, different things as I'm walking to the pulpit? I'm experiencing an overwhelming sense of different emotions, and it took me a few years to realize I wasn't experiencing only my own emotions. I was picking up the energy and the emotions of the people in the building. And then when I realized that, I started to learn how to protect my energy and how to discern, only because I built relationship with myself, how to discern what's my thoughts and my feelings and which ones belong to others. And I know you know a lot about this topic. Would you elaborate on that for me? I find this so extremely important and interesting.
Yeah, I found that out about myself very literally on a trip to, it was um, a yoga retreat that I had gone on for my 40th birthday, which was in January of 2019. And a I had had my spiritual awakening a few months before that. And I had been told that on this retreat, I would be participating in a ceremony that would be spiritually healing. So I didn't know what it was at the time. It was announced shortly before the trip that we would, in fact, be doing a sweat lodge ceremony. And even though I typically, you know, had I not received that ahead of time, that information, I probably would not have done that, just because you know, as an empath, it is difficult for me to tolerate heat. So, but I was feeling really excited for it because I was excited for this experience. And the woman that I was walking with, she was very scared, right? She was panicking even inside, but she seemed really calm on the surface. And when we started the ceremony, or right before we started the ceremony, she had said to the shaman, well, if it's too intense for us and we want to leave, is that an option? And he said no. And I immediately started to cry, even though I wasn't feeling scared. I wasn't feeling anything other than my own excitement about what was going to happen. And yet I literally caught her feelings, right?
Yes.
And that was the first time, and I'm sure to everyone around me, they just assumed that I was scared, that I was, you know, I was emoting for myself. But it was just so obvious to me at that point in time that that was not true. And it really alerted me to the need to protect my energy. Because another example of that was, my son was in a classroom in which the teacher was um, low vibrational, to say the least. And when I would go into that classroom and step to the threshold, I would instantly pick up on tremendous amounts of anxiety, and just, you know, really felt terrible to walk into that classroom. And then after that, I decided, or I learned to protect my energy. And when I stepped in, I was shocked at the difference. It was the difference
Yes.
between walking into that and taking on all of the energy around me, and then not, and not being able to feel anything. So.
Sure. That's amazing. That's amazing. I appreciate you sharing that with the audience. Now, we also touched on, I believe I called it frequencies, and you have those bowls for the sound healing. Would you elaborate a little bit on that? Because I know the frequency of love, and there's different frequencies. There's even a frequency that you can listen to that can heal DNA. It's a frequency that when you focus and meditate on that frequency, it heals your DNA. It works into the cells of your body. So would you like to elaborate on sound healing, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually not yet a certified sound healer. I do have the crystal bowls behind me, and but I do know without a shadow of a doubt that how healing vibrations are. I mean, we are vibrational beings in a vibrational universe. So to put it as simply as I can, we are energy. Everything around us is energy, right? We know that from quantum physics. We know that there's vibrating particles in everything, including us, right? So yeah, so that's the type of thing that I previously would have completely dismissed as healing, being in a very traditional 3D, conditioned mindset around it. That once I opened my mind to it, what a beautiful way to make healing more accessible, right? Because you can get people in a large, in a room, and fill that room with healing vibrational sounds and heal a whole group of people at once, or at least for that moment, because healing is, it's tricky. It's not a college degree you hang on the wall, right?
Yeah.
Healing is
Super
sometimes a
practical.
day by day, moment by moment process,
Yeah.
and we're
Yeah.
healing from different emotional triggers or familial situations, and things that unfortunately happen to all of us on earth that are not necessarily what we wanted, but are necessary for our evolution and growth.
I love that. I love that. And I always explain it to the young ones like this, your body needs a certain your body needs a certain importation of sound. Like some days I would listen to very high-paced music if I'm exercising or if I'm in the dojo, or even if I'm just busy with a project. Then there's those other days. And this is all about the intuitive listening to your body. Other days I would listen to this one song with the instrumentals, and it would just minister. So sound healing is so much bigger than we think. It's more than that, the frequency, like you said. It's even in the music that we listen, it's in the
Oh,
music that we
absolutely.
create. It's all over us.
I
Yeah.
mean,
So
I have a controversial opinion, but I think there's more healers in music and more channels in music than there are
yeah,
in, I
I
mean, because
love it.
it's all about connecting to that flow, connecting to that one
Vibrates.
consciousness, right? That's where inspiration comes from. And yeah. So no, I'm
I
a
love it.
firm believer in all
I
of that.
Thank you, Kat. I know we are going to elaborate on this later this week. I can't wait. There's so many things floating in my mind, and you are
Either.
so knowledgeable, and you have done the research. You've been through it. You are helping people actively. I commend you on that. Thank you for a phenomenal Meticulous Moments interview. You've brought so much value and upliftment. And I want to ask you, Kat, are there any words of wisdom that you want to end the session with before we go?
Yeah, so in thinking about this, I think just self-trust really is what I want to say. If I could go back and tell my younger self one thing, it's to trust myself. That
Yes.
I had wisdom within me that would guide me through my most difficult moments and decades,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Um and I think that's something that people really need to hear, because I think if we're really conditioned not to trust ourselves, we're conditioned to
Oh,
trust authority, we're conditioned to trust our parents for better or
yeah.
for worse, right? We're conditioned to trust the people around us, again, for better or for worse. And at the end of the day, nobody has a map to where they've never been, and no one has ever been you
Right?
before,
Yeah.
right? You're a what, one in 400 trillion chance, or I don't know what the stats are, but
No,
you know,
the-
and all it takes is a thorough look with a skilled astrologer at your natal birth chart for you to know that you were born on purpose for a purpose, right?
Beautiful.
So that would be my parting words, is to trust yourself and know that you're here for a much bigger purpose, whether that's clear to you or not. Please stay with us and please listen for those inner promptings.
Absolutely true. I agree. The universe is always conspiring for our highest good, and we all have a destiny, and it's a destiny that only you and I can fulfill. We are each unique. Thank you for you. You are unique. You're amazing. And I can't wait to come back and discuss many more concepts with you. We have a lot of plans for 2023, and I know the universe is blessing that. So thank you so much, Kat.
Thank you so much, Juanita. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone. And to the Meticulous Moments audience, we'll be back. We love you. And we are going to be posting Kat's all her social media contact details. Follow her, follow the petition, network with her as we cheer her on this wonderful leadership journey. And with that, we say goodbye.
Thank you.